Navigating continuous disruption across global supply chains. I guess in reality that could have been the headline for the entire conference, maybe every day of your working lives at the moment. But as I mentioned when we started the event this morning, our objective is not to bring you together for a moan fest and just list every problem that we're facing, although as much fun as that might be. We do want to talk about the solutions. We want to talk about how we're mitigating things. We heard from Kelly this morning about the visibility and about the team integration and collaboration that's really helping to support that. And so in this session, we have a number of experts who we've brought together, specifically expertise on the international supply chain piece, to talk us exactly through some strategies for mitigation. So I'm gonna introduce and invite them up now. Can I have Ryan Etherton? You want to come and sit here, Ryan? Ryan is Senior Manager Transportation and Logistics at American Axle, obviously a very important Tier 1 supplier here in North America. Yes, round of applause for Ryan. Marcus Bennett, who is the CEO of a Quick group of companies at Quick Global Priority Logistics, which is also part of Kuehne Nagel. For those of you who are, yep, Marcus, welcome. Thanks again for the great reception last night. And last but certainly not least is John Andrew Carmichael, Global Head of Automotive at Maersk, and I think perhaps the bravest man in the conference today. Representing a sea, but also as we'll learn about much more than container shipping. Gentlemen, have your seats. Very glad to have you with us. Again, for those in the global audience watching, put through your questions and I'll address them as we can into our discussion. Everybody here, you're welcome to also ask a question live. Just put your hand up. We've got some mics on either side. COVID protocol to avoid you touching them. You can just go to the side and ask, but I'll call on you for that. Let's start, and I'm going to start with you, Ryan, representing a major Tier 1 here. Let's start with some of the insight each of you has to tell us about the most significant impacts that you're facing and what you're doing to address them. So if you can talk to us.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Obviously, outside of cost, I think the biggest issue facing our company, probably everyone in this space, is the planning and forecasting. Is when are you going to get your shipment that's coming from abroad? Historically, you could always plan on knowing that depending on the various trade lane you're talking to, that the transit time, port to port, door to door, was going to be pretty consistent. And I think everyone can agree with me that that's not been the case for the last 12, 18 months. So it's been a real challenge for us in the fact that when the pandemic first started, the immediate thing to do was, well, let's get more inventory in the pipeline. Well, by the time we started to shift to get more inventory, we were already at risk, and we started doing more premium modes, air freight, and started trying to divert some of our ocean freight from the ports, go direct truck versus rail. So I think for us, putting my material planning hat on and thinking about the folks that sit in all of our facilities, it's been a great challenge for them. Every single day, managing the demand from the customer and managing the flow of material coming into these facilities and making sure that we don't put our customers at risk has probably been the most stress for us in that area.
Absolutely. Marcus, you represent some of the solutions that were just described there, but why don't you tell us a little bit from the Quick's point of view?
Well, I think it's probably twofold. From the external perspective, we're trying to work very closely with our customers and trying to mitigate some of the demands, that are changing every day. So it's a very, very fluid situation. I think having meaningful relationships with your customers and trying to work on this partnership approach definitely helps. We find trying to get traction with our customers slightly difficult sometimes because everyone is constrained about what's going on. The more meaningful solutions we can create with customers is when we're actually sitting down and talking to them and trying to understand their pain points, which are changing all the time as well, and we get that, And I have to say, the more engagement we have and the more proper type of conversations around the data that they have and helping us with that helps us provide more meaningful solutions, whether it's in the group that I work with, which is basically time critical, next flight out, next drive out, very high touch points, or along the wider customer base that we have within Kuehne Nagel, whether it's our overland division, our sea freight division, or our air freight division, and having one voice to the customer to trying to work on those solutions. I think internally we've had a lot of challenges, be it a hybrid situation, people working from home, no global travel. the constraints that we have around people and different options that they have. Like I relate very well to the last session around driver availability and the benefits that are there, and trying to upscale and encourage people in. So it's a very, very dynamic time that we're in at the moment, okay? And I think as well, I have to compare the automotive industry to the other industries that we serve as well. And there are good examples of best in class in other industries as well that I think over time we can explain to customers that they can leverage from as well.
Thank you very much. And John, I said you were the bravest in the room. Obviously, we know that container shipping has a share of challenges right now. Maersk working across that. Can you tell us a little bit about what's being done to address that?
Yeah, but I think from a Maersk perspective, one of the things we have prided ourselves over time has been trying to achieve best-in-class service reliability. And even if you look at the statistics today, we're there. The problem is we're a very bad bunch at the moment. And I think that's the key challenges today. From our perspective, a lot of our time is focused on how do we improve schedule reliability by actually doing quite a few things, getting more vessels into problem areas, trying to work with authorities on getting faster discharge facilities, getting the right labor. COVID has put a lot of restrictions on labor availability in many places, and that has increased the challenges of actually trying to operate a reliable ocean network on a consistent basis. So there's a lot of challenges, but at the same time, we're also trying to look at what intercontinental transportation or end-to-end transportation is a bit differently, and start to focus more on the outcome and not just on a CY transit time, as Ryan was mentioning. So when we commit to customers on the outcome they want to achieve, how can we combine the assets, the data, and the capabilities we have to actually achieve that outcome at the lowest possible cost? And I think it's that change in mindset that also as logistics service providers we need to have, because it's not just good enough to look at one portion of the transportation network.
That does seem very key, obviously, to integrate and understand all the pieces of it. From a container shipping side, is there also, we know there's some structural issues right now. So is that a capacity investment that needs to follow to redress that? And is that also an important piece of this?
Yeah. I think if you look at supply of, for example, new vessels capacity injections, it's been 1% to 2% per year over the past years, relatively aligned with whatever the market was growing. I think demand now has just increased so significantly that it's completely outstripped any available or incoming capacity. You look at new builds, everything that's coming in is being immediately put into service. You look at, for example, scrapping of old vessels, it's almost gone to zero at the moment because everything is being put to work. So there's definitely an investment, and we already see many carriers doing orders for 2023 onwards, but it takes several years to build a vessel, so it's not something that will come immediately. What we've been focusing on is on the partnership side. So the customers we're working with, how can we improve our service offerings? How can we look at the outcomes in the best possible way to support them during these hard times? So the partnership angle is definitely the key for improving our service at the moment.
Well, we look forward to a couple of years' time when an 80,000 TEU vessel carrying nothing but semiconductors is setting sail, I think, to these shores. Marcus, we think obviously the expedited and premium freight is a way to react and kind of avoid some of the worst. But are you working with customers in different ways, a bit more proactively as well, to try to strategically plan a bit more where some of that might be?
Absolutely, and I think our business we're in Quick is by the exception, okay? And we obviously understand the pressures that our customers are under as well. And I think how we engage, especially with our salespeople, our key account teams that have one face into the customer, that are proactively having those conversations and trying to understand the potentials that are coming down the line. We have a lot of really cool tools within our organisation. We've invested heavily on the KN side and on the Quick side around predictive analytics, AI, machine learning. We're doing all this at the moment. We do have some challenges with our customers around the data, the quality of the data, but you're never going to get it 100% right. And I think I'd just encourage customers to lean into those conversations and try and let us script potential solutions around all of that. I think in the Quick organisation, I think it's just important that our customers are aware that if they need us, we're there and we can help. We build high levels of trust with the customers, but we absolutely understand the pain points around inventory management, around the financial constraints that are there as well, and meeting budgets. So we don't want to be pushing customers into using the time-critical service if they don't need it, but we want them to have the understanding of what we can offer within the wider KN group.
Ryan, you alluded to the material planning challenges, forecasting. We know that is an issue. How is it impacting how you manage, let's say, the ETA planning? Are you constantly having to readjust kind of every day, or have you just effectively built in a much longer lead time and higher expectation for cost?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think, so what we've done is kind of what John and Marcus have alluded to, is we've really made an effort to leverage our partnerships with our forwarding partners. Having much more frequent conversations, meetings and reviews, and including in these conversations, like for example, weekly reviews of everything's in transit, also looking at making sure that all of our future forecasts have bookings surrounded by them, so we're not losing something with no visibility. But bringing our material planners in these discussions and conversations and making them aware of the conditions, because a lot of times, if they're not involved in it, it's just hearsay, and they're not actually involved in the process. So it's very important that everybody from end to end is acutely aware of what's going on. But as far as transit times go, we constantly look at, we're constantly going back and measuring what our actual door-to-door transit time performance was month over month, so that we can adjust our transit times. It's not as easy as that, because the long lead times of these materials don't always satisfy these changes, but we're trying to proactively do that, communicate, and make sure that everyone throughout the organization understands where we have risk and what we're trying to do to mitigate that risk. As well as having these open discussions with our partners and understanding, hey, let's talk about 2 or 3 options outside of just the normal mode that we always resulted to, and looking at hybrid options, sea air, or eliminating rail and doing different things with trucking, really exhausting every single option, because you can't just, whatever we used to do is not working today. I think we all know that. So it's really just being as creative as possible, pushing the issue, sometimes challenging our forwarders to say, look, I need you to come up with something different, right? Give me some crazy options, and let's exhaust it. Because at the end of the day, the worst thing we can do is not meet the commitments that we've made with our customers. And that's what we're constantly doing right now, is just making sure that we're not defaulting on our commitments.
John, we talked a bit more about that end-to-end view. How can Maersk help, or shipping lines, in fact, help companies have a clearer picture of these schedules and changes, given the volatility that we know is there? Is that an IT piece? Is that more of a relationship piece? How would you describe that?
I think there's several angles to that. I mean, there is a component of uncertainty in the operating environment at the moment that's probably difficult to model completely. But one of the things we focus on is leveraging data and AI and the machine learning capabilities in order to improve the predictability of our schedules. For example, if any customer who ships on our vessels through Maersk.com, they actually have access to predictive ETAs from the get-go. So they can immediately start seeing, with the data we have today, this is our best estimate of the arrival time. Now, there are definitely situations today that throw curveballs at us, and then how we react to that. We also do a bit of more creative propositions around, for example, can we do different types of stowage to give customers optionality of discharging earlier without a massive cost impact? Can we do things like transitioning modes, as Ryan was mentioning now, in Asia-Europe, for example, we transition in Dubai to then reduce the air freight cost, but then get the same inventory faster into North Europe. Solutions like this to try and mitigate the unpredictability without having a massive impact in inventories, or as least impact in inventories as we can.
So literally a sort of mid-flow change, right? Yeah. So changing from mode, from one route to another. Ryan, I mean, again, we know the unpredictability in there, but how would you say, in general, the information on production schedules, upstream and downstream, are people aligning better? Are there efforts being made to, I mean, there's a bit of a long side there, so I think if you want to leave it at that, then by all means.
It's a little difficult. I think right now a lot of people are operating in chaos, and when you're operating in chaos, things aren't going the way that they should go to plan. I think as far as data integration, we have a way to go in terms of the information that we can provide to our partners to hopefully help them plan better. I mean, like I said, we've really made a concerted effort of making sure that we're giving our volumes, our schedules. Now we're 4-6 weeks out, no matter what, just to try to make sure that we're getting our allocation, we're getting our bookings. I think, you know, from the customer side of things and with the microchips, I know it's been a lot of pushing and pulling across our facilities where sometimes there's really no notice, and especially if you're talking about the global supply chain, there's really no time to react, right? So it's been a challenge. I don't think it's done on purpose, but I think there's a long way to go in terms of how can we get better integration from, you know, end to end, from customer through partner through our supply base, to have better visibility and be able to mitigate any of that risk and make better decisions.
And maybe just a quick follow-up on that from an American Axle point of view is that I imagine there's a fairly big piece to be done there in terms of ERP to MES to TMS to, or how you work with providers. So
sure,
it's not just one.
Yeah, I mean we have multiple ERP systems, which I think companies are now doing a better job of. They can work with any type of data, any type of system, and integrate into their end. But it's always challenging, especially with, you know, you have different systems in different countries, different providers, and there's not I don't think we found any solution that can tie everything together yet. That's what we always talk about doing. I think we've had a strategy to try to find a better way to do this for a few years, and we haven't made a whole lot of progress on that front.
Maybe starting with Marcus, both you and John mentioned sort of solutions from other industries. How would you kind of compare automotive with others in terms of this sharing of data and information? And is there something to learn from others in this side?
So from my perspective, we're dealing with quite a number of different industrial verticals. So there's obviously different cultures, there's different demands, different final customer expectations, etc. I think on the level of a maturity curve, there's probably a little bit of a way to go. Let me put it like this. And there has to be a willingness to go on that journey and stay in that journey and have that stickability. But based on some of the conversations that I've had over the last few days, I think there's a realization now that if you really need to service your customer, manage your business in a reasonably cost-effective way that's sustainable long-term, that you need to go on that supply chain journey, okay? We do see it across the board with customers. Data is never 100%, but if you get your data to 80%, okay, it'll put you in a much better position to be more successful long-term. One of the challenges that we've had is bringing people into our organization that have a real skill set around analysing data, making some recommendations around all of that across the whole supply chain. And I think our industry is kind of in vogue now, shall we say, more than ever in the past. And I think for us, it's important that we create careers for people. We have succession planning, we have talent mapping in our organizations, because that's the way to go for an organization. Moving the product from A to B, we're in a very, very strange time at the moment, but it's always going to be like that in some way, shape or form. Hopefully it's not as bad as it is now, but supply chain is, and how we source and how we procure is changing all the time.
Absolutely.
I think from my perspective, what I sometimes compare also with my colleagues is the crisis now has definitely put some things in perspective that probably need to evolve further. That the status quo has definitely changed, and new perspectives need to be brought into the industry. And what I noticed also a lot is, and it was alluded to in the morning session, is the integration between logistics service providers and both OEMs and tier ones. It seems from a manufacturing perspective that's very integrated. There's co-design, co-development. But then when we look at logistics in the past, it was something that was left. It was more an optimization game, product by product optimization or transport mode. And it probably needs to evolve a bit more into a partnership objective of actually running the best possible supply chain. And not everybody has the full capabilities. There's experts on both sides. And I think collaboration is probably one of the biggest drivers that I see changing. The amount of conversations that have opened up into a view of our customer supply chain has increased dramatically over the past year. Because there's, I think, a realization, and we start digging through and you see the amount of, for example, legacy systems that, or things that have probably not evolved over the past decade that probably need to be looked at and modernized. I think the current scenario is definitely putting that in perspective.
Ryan, do you see scope, or is it starting to happen where logistics, supply chain planning can come into the picture at an earlier stage, R&D, engineering? Now, I know we spoke about this with Kelly this morning. Sometimes you have directed supply, you have the OEM, so you're not always in control of your destiny. But where you are, can you be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big push for it as far as inserting logistics into the earlier gate stages and new program launches. And it's always integrating, we're really trying to take a more lean approach in terms of making sure that when we talk about planning logistics, it's end-to-end logistics. So there's a production plan or a facility plan in place in terms of this new line or this program is coming into the facility. So you look at how is this going to be manufactured, and from that point, how does the inbound operation flow into that facility to optimize the movement, the material handling into that workspace for the operators and for the overall production. And then all the way back to logistics and packaging and routing and planning. So we're definitely having these discussions. Specifically, we're designing some new roadmap in this form as far as our procurement, our sourcing, supply chain for our EV business units. And we're looking to adopt that into our legacy. So for sure, I mean, it's such a, I think, more recently, the cost of transportation is becoming more and more important to companies, especially with the rising costs and the complexities, and it's getting more exposure. So by virtue of that, it's our area, our department is becoming more integral into the success in launching and obviously cost management. So I would say absolutely.
Great. We've got a couple of questions from audience. Perhaps we can show them up here to give the audience a sense. I'm also going to stand in case there's anyone from the crowd who, now I can see you. Well, I wish I couldn't, actually. One of the questions, retailers have resorted to charter vessels to meet holiday demand. Has there been any talk about OEMs and tier suppliers following suit? I don't know if anybody has thought about that, or
maybe these guys better. I mean, we've asked the questions. I think we've heard more recently. There's some of that coming into play now. We haven't jumped on that yet, but we're not bashful. If there's an opportunity to move our cargo and it's going to be helpful for us, we'll definitely take that approach. We're looking into every option possible.
I have seen requests already of doing this. I think it's the problem is even if you do that, you still hit a bottleneck, and I think that's the biggest challenge we have. It's actually not necessarily that vessels suddenly are sailing differently that's causing them to be delayed. It's actually the bottlenecks at the ports, then getting containers out of the ports. That's one of the key issues, and that's what from our side actually absorbs, if you will, capacity, because instead of taking 2-3 weeks to cross the Pacific and discharge in LA, for example, it now takes 4, 5, 6 weeks, and that just absorbs capacity that could otherwise be sailing frequently. So I think it's not only about chartering vessels and getting them in, which are actually extremely scarce at the moment. It's also what do you then do once you get to your destination, and that's another part of the complex puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those problems that just throwing money at it doesn't always help. You might want to book a year's worth of capacity. The only question is, which year is that going to be? If there's any questions in the audience, I know we haven't actually heard from the audience too much today, but if you have any question, put your hand up, and I'm glad to address it. If not, I'm going to just turn to this. Sorry, John, I think there's the other one for you. Again, people being anonymous. Brave are they. How is Maersk making a difference to automotive customers to ensure containers availability, shipment reliability, and cost optimization between China and the US? Is there any best practice that you could share?
I mean, from my perspective, what we work on with our customers, and we have a pretty big automotive base into the US direct customers, is we're really focusing on a long-term view and trying to support that long-term partnership that we have with these accounts that we've been working on for 10, 20 years. It's really where the partnership shines through, and we work through the challenges with them. Yes, costs are up, but at the same time, we try to optimize and have. One thing we pride ourselves is once we make a commitment, we live to that commitment to the extent that we can within what's in our capacity. So I think the view of partnership and actually going and thinking about a long-term supply chain relationship with our customers is what we focus on to help in those cases.
I want to, we talked about it again a bit this morning in the opening session, the just-in-time versus just-in-case. how the inventory balance starts to change. Ryan, do you cringe as much when you hear? Do you worry about, do you see the dollar signs just running up, or do you see some of the equation shifting in some particular areas?
Yeah, probably not the right answer, but I'm not too critical on inventory. I'd rather care about the integrity of our transportation. But I think it's, that's something that we're always in very spirited battles on, in terms of what's the right mix of inventory and transportation, and trying to balance it. And I think the earlier session this morning, it was really, you can't just you can't just peanut butter smear something across the board. It's got to be tactical and strategical by facility, based on the supply base, the customer, the continuity of your supply base, and the reliability of your network. And I think that's really kind of how you have to take the approach. And we're always trying to do as best we can to satisfy the company goals and helping the facilities meet their inventory targets, but also not be at risk. And the other side of it, we always try to be kind of the police in terms of giving the guidance and the instructions as to what we think we should do. Being quote unquote the experts of the transportation group for the organization, to keep us in best position to avoid any added premium cost or changing of materials, because that's one thing that's really being we haven't really mentioned today, but in our organization, it's the constant changing and the loss of optimization in terms of changing from product to product, because we don't have this part coming in today and the line had to stop and do a changeover and start on another product, just to keep the people in the building working. So lots of challenges, but yeah, I think it's just got to be defined by location and manage as best as we can in these terms.
Marcus, sometimes a properly executed expedited strategy can obviously support lean to a higher degree. And I mean, are you working with customers more from that point of view?
Absolutely. Very closely with our customers. I think it's said earlier on that we've one voice into our customers, exploring all the options and giving the customers all of those options, but also trying to understand the forecasting model, the dynamics, and giving and having those intelligent conversations. Everything is extremely fluid at the moment, and I think it's giving the customer the best option, but the comfort factor that if they need us, that we're there, and that builds high levels of trust. So, as an organisation, I probably shouldn't say this, but we're not really in sales mode as an organisation. We're in customer engagement mode to try and provide solutions because of all the dynamics that are out there at the moment. Okay, and what we're trying to do is invest in those customer relations for the long-term value of our organisation, but also for those customers.
John, do you want to add anything on that, particularly in terms of the balance of just in case in certain inventory strategies?
Yeah, I mean at the end, variability in lead times is precisely what drives that decision, right? And if you have higher variability, you'll probably want to consider stocking up and these types of things. I think from that perspective, we see now the just-in-case drive precisely because it's relatively uncertain what's going to happen in lead times, what's going to happen, and if you want to keep a supply chain as demanding as automotive running, you need to increase your safety stock in many cases to manage that. There was a comment also on the balance between transportation cost and inventory, that in some cases it might start tipping over to might as well stock up instead of having to pay the premium, which is also extremely high at the moment. So I think there is a turn. I do think, and this is probably something to be seen, if things, and I say if because we don't know about the future, but as things become more stable, then we might see a further return into more of a lean type solution, because of course there will always be the focus on optimizing the supply chain. But I think for now it's definitely one of the tools where possible to use balance out inventory to reduce stockouts and whatnot.
We have about 5 minutes left, and probably it's unfortunately the right balance between the now and the future. There's 5 minutes versus 30 minutes talking about the challenges of today. But let's use the last 5 minutes to look ahead a little bit and perhaps identify where you might see the next disruption that we need to prepare for. We have questions in the chat wondering if it's electrification, for example, West Coast port strike next. Well, it's not. Seems everyone's assuming it will be the strike. I guess pessimistic there. But yeah, maybe I can ask you to think what you're thinking about, or if there's other things that we as an industry should have on the horizon, so we can start preparing now. And I'll start with you, Ryan.
I wish I could predict that. The organization's always asking us, can we tell the future? And we've never had so many discussions and reports and information going up to the top floor. But I think what's going to happen, we're seeing it in the news, we're seeing it publicized by a lot of companies, is going, changing supply chain footprints and strategies, right? Trying to protect yourself and regionalizing the supply base. I think we're seeing it that the customers are starting to push that to the tier ones. They're looking for that insurance to know that they have a closer supply base, and their suppliers can manage it better. But I'll ask these two gentlemen right here if they can tell our future for us.
I wish I could. I think it's the same dynamics that we all face, just in different ways. I mentioned earlier on the challenge that we have around people and human capital. I think as a large employer, we have to become far more flexible around and look at how we want to develop talent in our organizations, because we see a drain there as well. We spoke about driver shortage earlier on as well. So we all have to become far more adaptable. I think you mentioned earlier on that there's no new normal. I think it's going to be like this for quite a while because of globalization. And you look at the pain points in the supply chain, in the different sectors, we're going to be in this space for a long time. So for me, it's very, very, very important that we keep close to our customers. We keep on investing in IT and IT solutions, and using that data to try and provide better solutions for our customers.
I think from our perspective, I definitely agree that it's difficult, one, to predict, but I do expect it to be still challenging operating environments, at least for the foreseeable future. I think there's things in the shorter term that you need to start considering. For example, Northern Hemisphere is going into winter. That brings in challenges in and of itself. And when the network is overall so strained, any small, it's like a butterfly effect, right? One small thing here can have a massive disruption somewhere else. And I think that's what we saw with the Suez earlier this year and a few other things. So I think there's definitely going to be challenges. I also agree it's about, one, choosing your partners wisely and engaging very openly. And I think that's probably one of the changes I'm seeing in order to try and manage this, is how can we understand better the supply chains? How can we actually understand better the business goals of the organization to actually be able to help them cater to that as best as possible? But I think, and what we've been at least saying as an organization is 2022, it's always hard to tell when I have a crystal ball, but it's still expected to be quite a challenging year going forward. But at the same time, we remain committed to helping our customers navigate it as best possible.
Winter is coming. That's our great forecast for you. Be prepared, because then there's Chinese New Year after that. That will make it easier. No, I do appreciate those points of view, and I think you hit it right on the head. In fact, my last question was, when do you expect a return to normal, or are we in the never new normal, as I referred to it? And I think your answers told us pretty clearly what we should expect there. So I think the clarity here is how we work together, communicate, integrate that data to manage it along the way. And of course, what we can see coming, footprint changes, electrification is going to bring changes like that over the long term. I don't think there's any denying that. You just have to look at where the investments are going, and that will bring changes as well. But we need to integrate more as an industry to manage that. I can hear some bellies rumbling, so I think we'll sort of make sure we get to lunch reasonably on time after a few delays. Before that, I want to thank everybody for your input and time here. It's very, very useful, and I think brave to talk about these challenges openly with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.